We're going to hand out, so we're going to share. Yeah.
Okay, we have to share.
Yeah.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Dale Freier, and on behalf of the Town of Fayette Historical Society, I want to welcome you to tonight's program on the early history of Bearytown. It's fitting that we're hosting this event in this building tonight, the historic Fayette Stone Church. It's 201 years old this year. And so the building itself witnessed all the things we're about to talk about. It was here. And some of you are likely sitting in pews that some of the people we're going to talk about. And certainly, if they weren't in a pew, everyone walked by this building. And some of them are still with us in the graveyard behind. So this is really exciting. Bearytown. How many of you, before this talk tonight or kind of preparation for coming, have heard the name Bearytown for the hamlet of Fayette? Okay, so lots of you. How many of you hear it often? Okay, outside of my pale. So, not a lot. And that's unfortunate because, as we're going to discuss tonight, Bearytown really did play a central role in the history of Fayette and in the history of Seneca County. And Henry Barry, who was the founder of Bearytown, is a man who is worthy of remembrance. And so we're going to have a chance to go over that tonight. I'm sorry, I'm having... So Josiah, when I touch this, it's moving the slides as opposed to allowing me to see notes. All my notes will come off. There's something I can do about that. Sorry, guys. Did you guys like the music?
Yeah.
That was Alaska Dunstan playing for us. Okay, that's fine. Got it. Okay. So I just want to set the stage for us tonight so we can understand what was happening at the time Bearytown was founded. And I'd like to start with this quote. Okay, Josiah, no matter what I do. Okay, there we go. There we go. So this is from Hodgkin's History of Western New York. It says, the rapidity of the settlement of Western New York and the uninterrupted prosperity attending it constitutes a circumstance which finds no parallels in the previous history of new settlements. Now, no parallels, that's a very strong claim. And so in the setting of the opening of this land for settlement, of course it belonged to the Six Nations Confederacy, and then as payment for service during the Revolutionary War, a military township was set up in the central part of upstate New York. And west of that, so west of the Preemption Road in Geneva, that was another plot of land which Massachusetts was claiming as a settlement because they claimed some of the same land that New York did in their original charters. But there's even a third area, the Cayuga Nation's Reservation, which we would be on this side of 414 tonight. We would all be sitting in. And so there's 3 lots of land. Now, by the time Fayette is founded in 1840, all of these have been sold or purchased either by private buyers or by the state or the federal government. But that is the kind of the background of what's going on. And when that land opened, people came. People came from, New England, came from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and it really was something that happened very quickly. Have any of you guys heard of David Hackett Fisher? He's a historian from Brandeis. He's my favorite historian. He wrote a book called Albion Seed, which looked at settlements in America over across different times. And one of the things he recognized was that things can change rapidly. It's not always a slow drip. And so in New England, when the Puritans came, a lot of what happened over a period of 20 or 30 years, where tens of thousands of people came at once and forever changed that culture. Same thing happened in the Appalachian regions. Well, it also happened here in Western New York. So I want to give it just a little bit more of a sense of that and a graphical representation. Okay? So these are all areas you would recognize: California, Kansas, Minnesota, and then this New York part into Western New York. And this is looking at over a 30-year period of time, how fast the initial population had a fold increase. And so, California is a huge state. And in the 30 years from 1850 to 1880, it had a 9-fold increase from where it started. Kansas, 13 times. Minnesota, and upper Midwest, a little bit more. But this area of Western New York where we are, 469-fold increase in population over a 30-year period of time from 1790 to 1820. That's the unparalleled that we're talking about. So this is a picture of Bearytown. This is 414, and we're looking north. This is probably taken in the 1910s or 20s. This is the Lutheran church. You can quite see behind it. What do you guys recognize in this picture? What strikes you about the road?
Lots of trees.
Lots of trees, Cindy. Yeah. We saw this in the Canoga presentation, too. And this area from Seneca Falls to Bearytown to Canoga was one of the most beautiful roads that anybody could travel. You see them mention it. And it's because it's not just that there's trees, but they're like perfectly aligned and very well laid out in landscape. And of course, all that is gone. The talk tonight is Bearytown, and I wanted to call it the original name for the hamlet of Fayette. But as I researched it, it's not. There was a name preceding it, and that name was Haynes Corners. 1798, Joseph Haynes is here. And if I called this the early settlement of Haynes Corners, nobody would come to my talk. So it had to be Bearytown. And we know very little about him, but he was a landholder. He was able to vote in elections, so he did have money. And he's mentioned in the town records based on roads. So the corner where we're sitting tonight, here with Bearytown Line Road to this side, and then the Ridge Road here, 414, this is the corner where everything happened. We are in it. And so that was a marking point for roads, even 200 years ago. But it didn't stay Haynes Corners. In 1815, Henry Berry comes and it becomes Berry's Corners for a little while, but that's not all. It also becomes Berrysville. Eventually, we're at Bearytown, and then, of course, today we refer to it as the hamlet of Fayette. So this is a map. It's a little bit hard for you to probably make sense of where you are, but what I want to do for you is outline some of the boundaries, because this is also a junction point, right? I talked about that West Cayuga Reservation, which we are in, but on the other side of the road, we're in the military townships. But then, if you go this way towards Bearytown Line Road, you're in Varick, and you're not in Fayette anymore, right? So, this would be my rough outline of the township of Fayette as it was set out in 1800. The other thing we need to talk about, though, this is where the West Cayuga Reservation was, okay? And, that's what it looked like, just kind of look at it in a plotted area for the West Cayuga Reservation. And so we've got some things we have to explain here. The plots of land on this side of 414, so everything that way, which was Military Township, were laid out as 600-acre plots. And they were awarded based on balloting for soldiers in the Revolutionary War. And that happened prior to this area, the West Cayuga Reservation, being surveyed. The lots on this side are only 250 acres. And of course, then we're at Bearytown, which is kind of at the junction of all those things. And so you have to be careful when you talk about lots in Fayette, because there is a lot 34 of the military township on this side, and there is a lot 34 of the West Cayuga Reservation on the other side. And so the military township really was on this side, and this was the West Cayuga Reservation, although Fayette was laid out across the thing. And so if we blow in there, or blow up there a little bit more, we can see, so here's Bearytown. We are sitting right now where the G is for the German church. And this is Ridge Road. And of course, right here outside these windows, you're looking at Varick, right? But if you look out these windows, you're looking back this way into Fayette. And then if you look across the road, you're looking at the military township, and if you look back behind me, you're looking at the West Cayuga Reservation. So it really is a crossroads, isn't it? Like it's really something, and that is why the southern boundary of Fayette is zigzag here, right? Because you cannot make 250-acre blocks match up with 600-acre blocks. At some point, there's going to be a mismatch somewhere, and it happens right here with the southern boundary. I would take note. Do you guys see the little hash marks on this road here? That represents a plank road that was built in 1850. And this spot up here was actually a toll gate, actually on my grandfather's property. And it only functioned until 1879. The plank roads didn't work very well, but obviously Bearytown was important enough that somebody thought there ought to be a plank road here. So this is looking at the three lots that made up the Bearytown area. And so again, this green lot is the 42, and then red is 53, which is what we're sitting on now, and then 58. And again, Varick, and then these are in Fayette. I want to make a little mention about lot 42, because I don't think this gets mentioned. This may be the only place I can do it. Remember, these lots were made for soldiers from the Revolution, right? So the Fayette side over here, which Henry Berry will go on to buy, which the Pontius family had before him, was originally awarded to a man named Henry Myers. And he was one of those soldiers in the Revolutionary War that took the challenge and signed up for a full 3-year term. So he was down from the Ulster County area, and we never talk about him because he didn't come. He's one of those people that didn't come. But he still deserved that lot. He got 100 acres from Congress and 500 acres from New York State for his service. And he did survive the war, but I think he may have passed away in 1792 and never had a chance to settle up here. But at least we can recognize him tonight. And so 52 was actually owned by Henry Singer. Christian Cooney had 58. Oops, definitely having a challenge here. Sorry, guys. So this is looking at a satellite view of Lot 58. And the reason I'm going to choose that lot to look at tonight is because there's a lot of development of Bearytown that happens along the Barrack side here. And also because Beth Somerville, one of our trustees and secretary at the historical site, her abstract is a lot of this information because someone who purchased her property in the past asked one of the deed companies to kind of look back and see how it all got brought back together. And so that's a real gift to us to be able to look at. So again, Christian Cooney got this in 1811. This is on the Hugo Reservation. And you can see that there's 250 acres here, 125 are sold off pretty quickly. And then another 50 acres, and then Cooney kept this. And even just in land transfers, right? In 1814, that 125 acres is worth $1,800. But by 1834, it's worth $4,389, and that's the land Orange Wilkinson will buy, prominent citizen in Bearytown, and ultimately it will get developed fairly quickly. So you can see it going from there. You already see the development of lots into what would be considered a hamlet or a village. And this is even looking at the satellites today, you can see it. It's matching the original lots. And then, by the 1860s, we're really getting out there where, the hamlet is pretty well developed on that Barrack side of the road. Okay, so let's jump into Henry Berry and Bearytown. Had anybody heard about the background of the Berry family, where they came from and how they got here? I hadn't. I mean, I grew up just a few miles from here, and I thought Bearytown, when I was a kid, was a place where they grew berries. I mean, when you're 10, that's what you think, right? And we don't have records. I don't have letters. I don't have a diary. I don't have journals. And so a lot of what I'm presenting tonight has just been kind of combing through, any source I can find to kind of build the history back. And what I was able to find is that, the Berry family originally is from Bern, Switzerland. And they came to Pennsylvania in 1739, and they were a well-to-do family. Joseph Berry, the grandfather, acquires 1,000 acres of land that he can run as a tenancy. So he can get farmers to come and settle on his land. He goes and builds a sawmill, grist mill, an iron forge, all things the farms would need at the time to be profitable. And eventually his area is called Berry's Mills and Berryport. Very interesting. This map down here is from 1759 from Pennsylvania. And if you blow it up a little bit, that is the land in Long Swamp where they settled. And that sign there is a sign for a mill, and that's Berry's Mills. Now, Joseph's son is Henry Sr., so our Henry here in Fayette is Henry Jr. And Henry Sr. Inherits a lot of wealth. He becomes one of the wealthiest people in that area, and so he is a big supporter of the Reformed Church. They actually helped build that church, and that's the circumstances, as best I can tell, that our Henry Berry grows up under. Well-to-do. But I don't know a whole lot of specifics beyond that. So let's jump into Henry Berry. He's born in 1768, like I said, in a well-to-do family. And he moves up here at about 1815. We know that based on how old his children are and where they are born. And he was referred to many times, I'll see this in records in the newspapers, one of the most popular men in Seneca County. Okay, and that's in the 1830s. That's saying something, because in Seneca County in the 1830s, there was intense factionalism. Okay, originally the courthouse was in Ovid, then it got moved to Waterloo, parts of the south got cut off and put back, parts of the north got cut off, and so there was a huge disagreement within the county. And so for you to be one of the most popular men in Seneca County, that's saying something. Okay, and I don't know why he came to Fayette. I wish I did. I don't know why. At that time, lots of Germans were moving up. Lots of people were open for settlement. But why did he leave? And he had a younger brother named Fred, and they were in this small business together in a mill around 1800. But eventually, he moves to Fayette County, and he buys all the land on that side of the road that was originally Pontius land, which would have belonged to Henry Myers. I want to give, if I just take a moment, I'm going to give another example of how much factionalism. Later this next year, I'm going to give a talk on the Seneca County Agricultural Society because it's something I'm very interested in. In 1820, New York passed a law that was going to give money to county agricultural societies for the promotion of agriculture, and everybody was on board. And in order to have that money available to you to do the premiums and be part of this big organization, you had to agree to have a single organization in your county, one agricultural society. And Elkanah Watson, who was the father of modern agricultural affairs in the United States, came to Waterloo, and in the courthouse, when it was originally built, pleaded with the folks in Seneca County to form a union agricultural society. And they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. Elkanah will write in his book many years later, this is the only place in all of the states, from South Carolina to Massachusetts, all through New York, the only place he was unsuccessful in creating a union agricultural society. Now, eventually it'll happen in 1841, and it'll happen in Bearytown. That's where they will need to do it, but it took a very, very long time. And so again, this most popular man in Seneca County, we need to understand that, we need to explain that. When Henry came here about 1850, he built a tavern by 1819. That would have been directly across the road where Tim Hyten has her black garage now, but where Howard Horrell had a garage in the past. That's where he built his original tavern. And this is notes from Diedrich Willers Jr. He was the son of the pastor of this church and a very famous man in Fayette. He deserves his own talk. But he says it so well here. It says, the well-known inn of Henry Berry at Bearytown was opened to the public in 1819. And here for many years, at the center of the county, political county conventions were held, the delegates being attracted as well by the location, as well as the geniality of its proprietor, as by his generous fare of roast pig, poultry, game, drops of cider royale, metheglin, and peach brandy, and occasionally a barbecue of roast ox. It sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So I'm just going to pick out a few things here that I think, really, if we don't take much more home tonight from this is enough. First of all, the location. Okay, Fayette, Bearytown, is essentially, in my opinion, the very center of Seneca County, as it ultimately existed. You can't be any more center, right? Think about it. You have 4 townships to the north. You have 4 townships to the south. You have 2 townships in the middle, and Bearytown is split between those, in the center of those, on both sides of the road, straddling it. So location is very important. When people from Ovid hated people from Waterloo, and people from Seneca Falls couldn't get along with anybody in Lodi, they couldn't even farm together. And the second thing was, he must have been a man of some ambition and wisdom, because he's feeding people, he's giving people really great drink, and he's listed as a genial proprietor. And I think if he was a false man, if he was a not humble man, if he was an honest man, people wouldn't have been coming here to have county conventions. I mean, the political atmosphere would have been red hot, right? Even from a federal level, right? You got the Jacksonians, you got the Whigs. Nobody can get along. And yet everybody could come across the street from this church and have a political convention with 800 to 1,000 people in the 1800s. It's really a remarkable story. I hope in the future to be able to find more information about Henry Berry that explains it. But as best we can infer now, he was a man of vision, an honest man, and really rose to the occasion. He was in the right spot at the right time. So this is something I do have from Henry Berry. So the Berry plot is in the very back of this cemetery, and this is his tombstone. And I'm always interested in what people put on their tombstones, right? You can sort of learn a lot. In all of my time looking at tombstones, I have never seen anybody use Romans 14:22. That is very interesting. Hast thou faith? Have it to thyself before God. Happy is he that condemneth not himself in that thing which he allowed. Of course, that's in the older version of the language. But Romans 14, interestingly enough, is it's a chapter. It's not very long, 23 or 4 verses. It's worth reading if you want to think about Henry Berry, because it's all about eating meat and drinking. And so can you think of a better verse for a tavern keeper to put on his... but why this part? There's other parts if you wanted to send a different message from that chapter you could have used. And I'm not a theologian, but I think what's going on here is that, there's Christians and people of Christian faith can have disagreements about non-essential things, disputable matters. which have gone back for millennia, right? Should you eat, can you drink alcohol? And my suspicion is that Henry was a man who was able to walk that line and not pass judgment, right? And so if people felt in their conscience they could drink, and if people felt in their conscience they couldn't drink, I think he was able to welcome both and do it in a way that was genuine. Of course, I'm inferring a lot here, but you know, with the little bit of information we have, we have to make some emphasis, and that's on his gravestone. So somebody, if not him, his family wanted us to know about it today. And I just think that's such a great example, personally as an individual, to the community in Bearytown, and then ultimately to a county that was so profoundly divided. And so, again, he's a remarkable man. Of course, he dies in 1836. So in 1836, we kind of have a summary from a gazetteer that was published about what's happening in Bearytown at the time Henry dies. And at that time, it says it has one Dutch Reformed church. Well, this isn't a Dutch church. This is a German church, so this has got to be Deutsch. Okay, just misunderstood. One tavern, which is Henry's, which is right across the way. 2 stores now, and 15 dwellings. At the time this church was built, there's probably only 2 or 3 dwellings here, and certainly no taverns or stores. So Barry made some key decisions in his life before he died, and I want to go over 2 key things that happened. Are you guys familiar with Charles Hoskins? I'm sure people from the north and the county that are interested in history. Charles Hoskins is probably the most famous merchant to ever live in Seneca County, at least in my opinion. And he was born in Lansing, New York, just outside of Ithaca. And as a young man, he did some training over in Union Springs in a store. And by 1820, he's married and moves to Bearytown. Of course, Henry Barry's only been here for a few years, maybe 3 or 4 years. He opens a general store, and Barry gives him place in his tavern to open the store in, probably on the east side, from what I can tell from the records. His brother William comes with him. His brother William becomes the postmaster in 1826. And so they're operating the first general store here in Bearytown, which is a key thing if you want to start a settlement, right? You need a church, you need a store, there's some things you need. And he will ultimately not stay in Fayette. He'll move when Seneca Falls, becomes its own in 1829. His brother William will stay, and Henry Barry's daughter will marry William. This is Hoskins' house in Seneca Falls on Fayette Street. You can look at it right across from Academy State Square. It's very beautiful. I don't have more time to go into it, but he was an amazing man. The clock behind the Seneca Falls Historical Society was on the top of his giant merchant's building in Seneca Falls before they took it down. And so I give Henry Barry credit. How did he recruit this 20-year-old guy to come over here and set up shop in a store? He picked him well, didn't he? He really, really knew how to pick him. So it makes me much more impressed with him. And this is going to be a really hard picture to see. Whenever I find a picture that might be meaningful, I want to put it in. Can you see the woman in this picture? That's Henry Barry's daughter, Salome, or Sally. This picture is taken in 1900 when she's about 90 years old. Maybe older, maybe 94 years old. And isn't that incredible? We can see a picture of a direct descendant of Henry Barry. I don't even have a drawing of Henry Barry, or a letter, or anything. I wish I did. So I wanted to share that with you. Okay. So, just going forward, they're setting up shop here in Bearytown in 1820. This is a general merchandise account for a store in Sheldrake. I don't have one here for Hoskins, but I thought it might be interesting just to take a quick look at what you can buy. You can buy a Bible. It costs you $2. But you could also, for a $half-gallon rum, for $2.60, which you thought you needed more. We're selling fish, calico, tobacco, wheat, and so these are the English prices. These are the equivalent in American prices. And I'm just going to take a second and do a shout out. I got this from Autobiography of a Farm Boy. So for any of you guys here in the central part of the county that would like to know what it was like to live and grow up, Isaac Philip Roberts, he grew up in East Berwick. He would go on to be the dean of the College of Agriculture. He's a great at Cornell. He's a great writer. The first 30 pages are his life in Fayette. Just reading what's in his root cellar is worth getting a copy of this book. It will really warm your heart. And so as far as day-to-day life, what it's like to be a child, the first 30 pages. The whole book is great, but this is an original copy. You can still get them on eBay. They do make reprints, but I can't recommend that enough for Barrett and Fayette people. It really talks about it. And he knows all the names, and he knows Bearytown, and he's just explaining it all. It's very cool. So, all right, let's keep going. How are we doing on time? Okay, so here's Henry Barry's next greatest decision. Okay, he gets Charles Hoskins here, but then he gets Diedrich Willers. And for those of you that were with us last year when we did the Diedrich Willers series, this is another top-end guy who he is able to get to come here and be the pastor. So this church was originally outside these windows. It was a log church built, about 1810 to 1813, and for a time they had, some traveling pastors. But Henry Barry's trying to start the settlement, and in 1821 they don't have a pastor, and so they talk to Barry and they say, "You got to find us a pastor. We want you to go back to Pennsylvania, and we want you to find a young one." Right? He doesn't want an older pastor. He wants a young pastor that will stay. And so Henry Barry leaves here, Bearytown, and he goes back to his home back in Barryport in Pennsylvania. And I didn't know this last year when I was presenting on Diedrich Willers. I wondered how they met and how Diedrich came to be here. Well, Diedrich was born in Wall, Germany, just outside the port city of Bremen. I can't believe I have to summarize his whole life in one slide. It's not fair, Rosalind. It's not fair. He fought in Napoleon's army at Waterloo, stayed in the occupying force in France for a while, comes to America in 1819 because he really has no family. When he's a very young boy, both his parents died and both his grandparents died. He's really on his own. And he wants to be a minister. He even practiced being a minister back in Germany. But he goes to Bearyport School. That is where he teaches while he's studying for the ministry. And I didn't know that last year. I found it in an old history of the alumni of this area, written in 1900. And they talk about him as one of their most famous teachers. And so, of course, this is what happens, right? There's no pastor here. Henry goes home. He meets up with his brother Fred. He says, "Fred, I gotta have a pastor for my settlement." And what does Fred say? "You gotta meet Diedrich. He's teaching at our school. He's studying with a pastor of our church. And he's young and not married." And it's like perfect. And so that is the circumstances how Diedrich Willers comes up here. And it is completely and directly due to Henry Barry's efforts. And Diedrich Willers will go on to be the pastor in this building for 60 years. That is very remarkable for this. I mean, we were in Canoga. They couldn't keep a pastor for 18 months. They would go through 30 pastors in 100 years. And Diedrich was chosen by Henry Barry and was brought up here. They did walk back together, and he became the pastor here. So again, here's another notch in the hat of Henry Barry. He's really doing things right. In your handout, for those of you who have it, there's a handout of the talk, and then there's a handout with maps. And I made those so you guys would have that either to reference tonight while we're talking or in the future. But there's 3 or 4 maps in there that do some outline of the hamlet where you can see the various things we're talking about. Of course, this is the German Reformed Church. We're sitting here. This is Canoga Road or Ridge Road going out, Barrett Town Line Road, and then 414 Foreman Road here. And you can see here's the tavern. This is Henry Barry's tavern, almost directly across. It's exactly where Tim's garage is right now. Exactly. And where Horrell, originally built that. So I'll just put that out there as reference. I don't have time to go over everything on this slide, but I wanted you to have it because that's kind of where we're getting our information from. This is from a joint map of Seneca County, 1859. It's a little bit different. I think the other map is a little bit older, and so it just outlines some of the places, but again, you can see the German Reformed Church here, the temple across the street, and then the cemetery behind it. And then 1874 is also in your packet, which again is going further on, and we're kind of confining ourselves to the early history, but I just wanted you guys to have that. So I got to keep moving. This is the sketch of the Bearytown Mill, which was right out here across the road. This is a sketch drawn by a man who saw it as a child. I found this in one of Diedrich Willers' letters when he was collecting information on the history of Fayette for the centennial. And so it's a log building, and that's what it looked like. It was run by horsepower. This back here was where the treadmill and the horse was kept. and it was built about 1834 to 35. It was initially owned by Philip Snyder. Did anybody remember that name from our talks last year? This is one of those guys that caused all the trouble for Diedrich Lewis, and so he was quite a character. And so there's a story that happens not long after Philip has this mill. He's running like tread power. I don't know if you guys have seen this. Sometimes you see dogs can run on the tread to turn butter in the old days. This is not the exact design, I think, because this one's running, with a belt. And so Philip is not that great of a miller. I'm convinced of it. In the letter, it talks about every day his wife would take an open bag of flour and dump some on him so he would look like a miller. So people would come and do business here. And the other reason I know he's not good is because one day he unhooked the power coupling to this mill, from the stone, and he didn't put the brake on. And the horses were on the mill, were on the treadmill. So the horses started walking. And now there's no resistance. There's nothing to hold these poor animals back. So they're going faster and faster and faster. And the letter, the boy who wrote the letter, he was a man at the time, to Dietrich, he says, everybody could hear the commotion. It's happening right here, right? It's happening literally just outside this window. And they've got to stop the machine somehow, right? These horses can't keep up. So one of the men starts throwing wooden rails into this wheel. So they go in and they snap, and they're just trying to slow it down. Eventually the horses collapse. And then the horsepower treadmill is over. that is a very short-lived experience. And so without that letter, we wouldn't know any of this history, but I find it very, very interesting. And you know how in 1836, I told you there were 2 stores in Bearytown, and that business here? Well, we know that they had a store in the tavern over here. This mill becomes the next door. Because Philip's not milling anymore. And so they put a store in there, and it passes through so many hands. Paint shop, wagon shop, people start living in it, it's a tenant house, and eventually Samuel Birch will take it down in 1846. But that's not the end of the history of the mill. Now, this is a much later picture. I don't have anything in between it, but this is the mill as it looked in 1900. A man from New York City, Maynard Lefebvre, will come up here and build the first steam-powered mill. He'll actually build a house next to it as well, which will come into our talk a little later. But that will also fail. And then you'll see just reams of Fayette people going in trying to reinitiate the steam mill, because without a mill, you can't, you can go to Canoga Springs and mill, you can go down, those types of things and mill, but you really needed one here in Bearytown, and they couldn't keep it. But there is one positive note I wanted to share with you. Sylvester Croninger. Has anybody heard that name before, Croninger? I'm not even sure if I'm saying it right. He was a young man back from Barry's hometown who comes up here in the late 1800s. He's got some training as an engineer and a miller, and he comes up looking for a job at the mill and can't get it. They won't give it to him. So he ends up being a farm laborer, ends up meeting someone, gets married, and finally a job opens up at the mill. And so he takes it. And so now he's just kind of doing, scout work over at the mill. But over time, he's saving his money, and there's a chance to buy a portion of the mill. So he puts a little money in and he buys a portion of it. And he does well. And then he buys a little more. And then he owns a quarter. Then he owns a half. Then he buys everybody out. And he owns it fully outright by himself. Puts in new flour rollers, has success, spreads his mills out all over, ends up in fruit. Very, very, very successful man. And again, this is a great story, a true success story of how of how a young man with determination could make it. Now, this mill isn't here anymore. This is another picture. This is literally right outside here. This is the fence you walked in to get in here. And so that mill is sitting right over here. It'll be owned by the Ritter family, and they're using gas power in the 1900s. And in 1925, everybody knew it was a terrible gas-powered engine, and that it was at risk of explosion, and it burned the whole place to the ground in 1925. That is the end. That's the end of the mill. Yeah. Okay, you guys recognize this building? Where's this building? Yeah, okay, see, we don't have to go very far to have this talk. Everything is almost touchable. So, what do you guys know this building as, those of you who remember?
Fire hall.
It's the fire hall. Does anybody remember when there was a store on the large side? Anybody? You do?
No, my mother.
Your mom would, yeah? Do you remember the store there?
I think I do.
You do? Okay. Well, I had no idea. You guys have a sense of how old this is? I look at it all the time when I come up here to the Historical Society, and I had no idea. Is 1840? Yes, 1838. I had no idea. The main part of this building is from 1838. It was that old. William Barry will actually build that store in 1838. Eventually, Henry Troutman gets it. It gets passed on to the Van Riper family, who had this addition. And then a man named Olin Emmons. Does anybody know the name Olin Emmons, the Emmons family? You know him. How do you know?
Where?
From Merrick. Yeah. So, do you guys remember Emmons?
It's on one of our maps.
Yeah. So it ended up falling into a young man's hand, and his dad will come and join him from the farm, and they'll be Emmons and Son, and they'll have that for a very long time, be very, 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 very successful.
I've always thought that was such a beautiful building.
It really is. And
There's something about the lines of it that just, has aesthetically appealing.
It really is. It really is. They will run it for a time and for a long time actually. But this Emmons family, this is really incredible because Olin will retire from this, around 60. But then he ends up getting a job running the barge canal before it's the barge canal as a supervisor. And then when he's 72. He takes a job at the Seneca County Trust Bank, and he's the vice president there until he's 92. And then when he's 92, he says, I think it's time for me to retire. I did like fishing when I was a kid. Maybe I'll go fishing. And he won't die for a few years after that. And the thing in the obituary says, it's just that the parts wore out. He didn't really die of anything except that the parts were out. And so I tell that story because he's probably responsible for the beautification of that building. You've got people like Henry Barry, Dietrich Willis, who got this built, the Emmons family who built that. These are can-do people who literally worked until he was, in his mid to late 90s. And just a very interesting story. Of course, it'll go to Seymour, Wolf, Seeley, Frankenfield in the future, but in the past, those are the people that we're talking about. Here's another picture of it. You've got lines here which are either telephone or electric. So this is moving it well into telephones came here in 1896, electric in 1824, 25. And this, you can see the church is just a little bit in the background here. See it? Mm-hmm. And this is looking right out at that building, when it was a store. I love these little pictures. Here's another view of it. And, the church is sitting right here. And again, the building we're talking about is this beautiful brick building here. Can you guys make out the plows here? Mm-hmm. Can you make out that sign? That's really hard from where you're sitting. And I don't know if I'm saying it right, but that's the wired plow. The wired plow was one of the oldest plow manufacturers in the United States, started in 1804, moved to Batavia in 1876. And that's like one of the advertisements. And they were selling them right here. Right here. This area here, I've been told by people in the past, was part of the post office for a very long time. Of course, the post office went with every store. If you look at the postmasters in Fayette, almost all of them were shopkeepers, early on, because you wanted people to get their mail in your store, right? Because that brought them in. Is it in England that way too? Yeah. So just a small tidbit of history of it. So this is you're in the store now, on the porch, and you're looking out across the street. What you're seeing here is the Grange building, so we know this is after 1908 because that's where the large Grange was built. This is what would, for a time, be called, this is the small Grange now, the Seneca 44 Grange. It was a store in the past, and I was just talking to Rosalinda. I'm beginning to think this was built in 1838 at the same time that was built. And so I've been very interested in seeking support to save this building. If you go in underneath it, it's all hand-hewn. And it did become the fire hall for a while, but you can see here there's a front door, and maybe it wasn't serving as a store at that time, maybe somebody was living in it. But just again, another beautiful, we had a car. Yeah,
that's cool.
that's pretty great. So we gotta keep moving here. We gotta look at the 3 taverns. So there's a bunch of 3s here. There's 3 taverns, there's 3 churches. Did you guys know there were 3 taverns in Bearytown? Again, this is a small, little hamlet, no, but because it's in the center of Seneca County, because of its political influence, because of the leadership of Henry Berry, people are coming here. Enough that we can support 3 hotels. And I will tell you, it is a monster business to figure out the names and the owners of the hotels over time. Because we don't have records. And they change sometimes every year. And it could be the person who owned it isn't the person who's running it. And the name was popular, so the new person kept the old name. And they would switch from one hotel to another hotel. Occasionally they're in Waterloo, they come back. And so I've got 17 pages of notes from the newspaper articles of just trying to write out who was where, and this should be its own talk. So I have seen this used. Lower hotel, central hotel, and upper hotel. Okay? Lower hotel is where the Fayette Hotel is becoming, housing now, was. And it wasn't called that then, we'll go over it. The central hotel is Barry's. It's the one in the middle. And then the upper hotel is the one on the Varick side that is up by where the open lot is, where there used to be a church. And we would refer to it in our generation as the Smith Hotel. But I'm careful to want to not use those words too much because we're remembering names of the last name it was. It's not a historical name. And so I like this lower, central, and upper. So the use of these hotels changed over time, right? Like, what would they have been used for when Berry was here?
Meeting houses.
Maybe meeting houses. People probably needed them to stay in, right? When they're traveling. But over time, they really become entertainment focused. There are the big meetings that are happening. Sometimes there's up to 800 or 1,000 people. It's unbelievable. Sometimes the hotels will work together, and there will be like a Christmas dinner here in the Central Hotel, but the dance is at the Upper Hotel. Sometimes the Lower Hotel and the Central Hotel hate each other, and somebody puts up a giant, as tall as they can fence, so they don't have to see each other. Yeah. Sometimes they're owned by the same person. Sometimes they're not. And so it's really a remarkable thing to kind of sort through. They all had horse sheds and barns. They had, right, the stable of horses. They would station the stallions, so you knew you could bring your mare to get bred. I mean, there was no end to what these guys would do. There were boxing matches. So in Berry's Hotel in 1890, there was a boxing match between a Canadian champion and a champion from Buffalo. And they talk about how they're using the Queensberry's rules, which were sort of new at the time, where you have to do the knockout, count to 10, use gloves. And it happened here. They had glass ball shoots. So instead of throwing up clay pigeons, they made glass balls and they launched them in the air, and people would shoot them with birdshot and get glass all over the place. What a dumb idea. It took them a while to figure out that was terrible. They had a fox hunt here in Bearytown with a $25 purse. You had to have at least 4 dogs. I really enjoyed learning about all these things. The last thing, at least on this part, I want to share with you is, Berry had his hotel, and then there were proprietors and owners, but it got worse in the late 1800s. The big breweries in the big cities started to buy all the small taverns, and they bought the ones here in Bearytown. And they may have kept some of the same names, but they were what was called tied. They were tied to the brewery. Have you guys heard that before? Probably you have. You were not allowed to sell any alcohol except what came from your brewery. And this really caused problems and probably helped speed about prohibition, because the people making the money on all this kind of efficient sale of alcohol were not the people suffering the consequences, because they didn't live here. And so it really disconnected the community from it. And in fact, after prohibition went through and when it ultimately was repealed, part of the second section of the repeal allows the states to control this so that they can outlaw that ever happening again. And so if you have a bar today, none of the big brewery companies own it. It's against the law to do it. And so it was, and ours was owned by a German company in Syracuse, and it made sense. There were lots of Germans here, so they were selling lager, and they were forced to have it. So I'm just going to briefly, this is where the Fayette Hotel is now. This is right across the street, right across the corner. I don't know if you guys can read that. That's called the Cottage Hotel. Columbus Cooney owned it. This building actually started across the street when the New York City guy built the mill, the first steam mill. And eventually it got moved and then moved again to where it became a hotel. This burned twice. So, and then it burned again when, in the future, Barry's Hotel will get moved over there in 1931, it'll burn. So every time somebody puts a hotel there, it seems like it burns. And again, Columbus Cooney, who ran this hotel, he was like Philip Reif-Snyder. He was constantly being fined for selling beer to minors. He was constantly being fined for violating Rainey's laws, which we talked about in Canoga, where you couldn't sell on Sundays and you had to offer food. And some of these fines were serious, like $200 a time. And there were fights. It was kind of like the cool place to go, but it was very, Dale, what word did you use? Is it like the rough house one, or I forget what you...
Oh, a lot of like rough and tough.
Yeah. It wasn't like Barry's Hotel, which was like a political convention place. But these guys invested a lot of money in developing huge halls and places for people to meet. The barbers would hang out there. They called them tonsorial parlors. All right, we got to keep going. So yeah, Cottage Cooney Hotel, Columbus Cooney Hotel, Upper Hotel. This is what would have been Barry's Hotel across the street. Now, this is obviously not at the time Barry had it, and I'm sure it's had massive renovations, through the various people that had it. But essentially, this is the building, and it sat right over there before the garage was built. Built in 1819, and a very, 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 very important hotel. There's a lot we could talk about the various proprietors, but I can't. But I'll just say, Barry Tavern in 1819. Gamby, who was a son-in-law, had it later. He had it, lost it, got it back. Sheridan had it for a time. C.J. Stone had it for a time. Then the Broadhead family got it. Has anybody heard of the Broadhead family from our Fayette area? This is a family we've got to talk about. 2 brothers and 4 sisters, and lots of interesting history. They really got into the tavern. Eventually it would be called the New York Hotel. Of course, it was the Central Hotel. It was the Fayette Hotel. I am skipping probably 10 other names. It's just too many names. Here's an advertisement when Gamby had it. This was in the directory of Seneca County. And of course, he changed the name to Gamby's Hotel. This is when it was the New York Hotel. You can kind of read it inside it. It is as hard to make out, but once I learned the history of the brewing companies, that's just Crystal Springs lager. So the Haverly Brewing Company, Eric just bought them. That was the lager people. This is a Thai house. They're Thai. Broadhead Hotel, and again, some of these names flop back and forth. This is Grace Lambert. I'm sure my dad, you knew the Lamberts, right? Would you? She's driving a 1910 Maxwell automobile, and I only know that because Louis Sorrentino, who saved this picture, these are kerosene lights, so you could drive at night. Wide wheels, much safer, relatively speaking. That was a great picture. Again, this is looking out across the Grange building across the way. It's just slowing down now. Built 1908. This is the hotel next to it. This hotel will be picked up and moved to replace the cottage hotel that burned.
Wow.
So Louis Sorrentino's family will buy it from the brewing company for $3,000 in 1920 because they can't sell beer after 1920. So all of these properties are worthless to them, and they bought a lot. And so he will ultimately pick it up and move it over to where the cottage hotel gets burned. Of course, once it moves over there, it burns in 1931, and then it gets built again as the Fayette Hotel most of us knew, which is now, has been renovated. And we see this, right? It was a hotel, now it's being apartments, it burns, it's being rebuilt, it's being renovated. This is the story of the taverns in Bearytown. This is very normal, very, very, very normal. Here's just another picture of it. All right, so now we're at the Upper Hotel, and we're almost done. We refer to this as Smith's Hotel. So there's an open lot where a church was, and this is the building right next to it. And we call it Smith's Hotel, even though Smith only had it from 1904, I think, to 1916. It had all these other people, and this is not all of them. This is not all of them. One of the names that sticks out to me, though, is Hex Hall. I had found this advertisement in our collection from from the Masons. They had a party here in 1887, and I asked everybody, even Walter Gable Williams, like, where was Hex Hall? Where was Hex Hall? Nobody could tell me where Hex Hall. Cindy, you read, you talked, I couldn't. Anyways, eventually I found in one of the that he had taken over the previous person, and so this is where Hex Hall. But you could go for 75 cents. You could get supper. If you wanted to stay to dance, it was 50 cents. And they really expanded their ballrooms in these places. So like Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, hundreds of people would come for these dances. They put in lanterns on the streets so everybody could see. It was very much a happening place. There's another picture of Smith's Hotel. You can see it there, right? Can you almost see Smith's Hotel? And then there's the lantern. This is James Smith. Victor Stahl, who was a longtime resident of Bearytown, he had left a few notes, and he said he was a short, paunchy man. He kind of looks like a short, paunchy man, doesn't he? And the notes he left said that every night he would go out and light his kerosene lamp, and it says Smith's Hotel. And what I'm told is the first telephone was put in here, although I've heard competing stories as well. Again, that's just kind of the story of how these taverns, really starting early on, but making this way up into the 1900s. This is a picture of it in 1970. This is Dwayne Kiefer and Ken Campbell. Does anybody recognize them? No? Okay, that's on the. So this is looking at it from the side, and this is the actual part where the hall was. Amy is the current owner. She told me that the bar was in here, and then the hall was up here, and it used to extend farther out. They actually cut it off at some point in the past, and she has like a porch out there now, but it was much longer. And she said it was a mess trying to redo the inside of that house because of all the makeovers from all the various tavern owners. She's just wallpaper and wallpaper and wallpaper. Okay, so the last thing we need to talk about is the three churches. We're in one. This was originally Christ Church, but we had the Lutheran Church where the Fayette Historical Society is, and then how many people in this room ever saw this church standing? This is the Methodist Church and the Baptist Church. So if you saw it standing, can you raise your hand? Okay, just a few people, Pam and Cindy and my dad. So this is going to pass out of memory because it's an open spot. So we need to talk about it. Because before it was a Methodist church, it was a Baptist church. Who knew that? I didn't know that. Just briefly, what I'd like to say about this church tonight, because we've talked about it some in the past, is that this is a pattern that's repeated everywhere with German Christians in the 1800s. This church was built as a unified building for two churches that were completely separate within. Okay, separate pastors, separate finances. They did not meet on the same day. They didn't share. They shared the building, and they shared the common language of German. But that was it. So German Reformed and the Lutherans did not. They didn't. And so this was called Christ Church, a good name for a building that has to be both. And so it's built as a log building just to the side here. But in 1824, after Dietrich Willers comes here, because Henry Berry brought him up, they build the first stone church. And it's not exactly the way you see it now, because all three of these churches in 1883 went through massive renovations. Everybody had their roof raised. Everybody got a steeple and a tower. Everybody got beautified into the Victorian era. And this church was no different. Originally, there was a balcony here, guys. And the balcony came all the way around here and behind you. The pulpit was where you walked in. And these Palladian windows were not there. They were separated. It was an upper and lower window set. And so the people in the balcony could see. But in 1883, all of that was kind of renovated out into what we see today. The brick church, which is Lutherans, where the Historical Society is down on the other side of the road, that actually was part of this Lutheran church that started, but they broke away, and that's why they're called the second, because the first still existed for a while here until the 1850s, and then they all either joined or became reformed. Cindy, is it true that they used to call this the White Church? They call it the White Church, the Methodist Church?
We always call it the Methodist. Nobody calls it Methodist.
I've seen references to the White Church, and at first I thought we were doing a disservice by calling Christ Church a stone church, but in 1830 in the newspaper, they're calling it the Stone Church. So it caught on. So Stone Church, Brick Church, White Church, Lower, Central, Upper Shepherd. It's the only way to really keep it straight. So this is Christ Church's picture from when we did the program last year. This is a picture of the inside of this church, and you can see the frescoing like along the rim that would have been up here. right? These are the same pews you're sitting, these are the same chairs up front. This is Reverend Kirshner. He was an amateur photographer, which is probably why we have the pictures. He probably set up the camera and then sat down to take the picture. This is a Harvest Festival in 1896. Here's another picture of it. You can see the frescoing even better along here. Now, the people looking in the front, you can't, but where the paint is peeling from the water damage in the back, you can see those stars. Can you imagine what this dome looked like with all those things in it? It must have been beautiful. And then you can see the exact same frescoing there that we see right here. And look at this carrot, look at this lamp. Boy, I would love to have that in here. So, again, this is 1890s after the 1880s renovation. This is the actual document where Henry Singer sold the land to them. There's some interesting things about it. We don't have time to go in, but at least we can read the document. This is an article that Dietrich Willis Jr. wrote for school about a German brick schoolhouse directly behind his church in the graveyard. And when I read that, I wasn't sure what he's talking about, but look at this, guys. There it is on the map. Do you see it? It's in the cemetery. And then the other one you have from the Cayuga Seneca map, it's clearly seen in the cemetery. And so that's just another interesting part of history. It was the German brick schoolhouse behind here. Oh, actually, there it is. I put it on there. There it is right there. That is it. 2 maps at 2 different times showing it, plus a letter. Oh, pretty cool. This is a picture of the Methodist Church, which is not there today. These are some of the sheds behind it. And I don't think we can appreciate the sheds. Like, the sheds for the Lutheran Church, in one account in the newspaper, said they could hold 36 carriages at one time. How big is those sheds? You know, it's hard to imagine them today. This is after the beautification. And the reason there isn't a Baptist church is because when they built it, they went into debt. And they couldn't pay it off, even though they had loaned the money from a trustee. So the trustee gets a mortgage against the building, and ultimately it has to go to court. Probably wasn't pretty. and at the end of that sale, like 10 years later, trying to pay it off, it ends up getting sold to the Methodist Church. And we have this. We have this document with everybody's signature and seals. And so it's very interesting to talk about that history of that First Baptist Church and Society in Fayette, which ultimately becomes the Methodist Church. This is a picture of the inside of the Methodist Church. You can kind of tell because of the way the windows are in the other picture. You guys have been in it, Cindy, right?
I remember the windows were red.
Were red. Had you been in it, Pam?
Mm-mm.
No, Dad, you've been in it, right? Yeah. I wish I could have seen it. Now it's a parking lot. And then the last church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church, of course, they were part of this church here. They broke off and started their own church in 1846, and then this is, again, after the beautification. I don't have any drawings of what any of these churches looked like before 1883. And then eventually it becomes the Masonic Temple up until 2004, and then it gets taken over by the Historical Society. And I think this is one of my last slides. Shops and businesses in Fayette and Bearytown. Okay.
I can't imagine it.
What's that?
I can't even imagine it now.
Yeah. This jewelry store, silver plater, tin shop, harness shop, meat market. There was a meat market here the whole time. I've never heard about these things. Multiple blacksmiths, multiple grocery stores. Of course, the dry goods. We know what the mill was doing. There was a shoe repair shop. Stay Factory was in the mill for a time. Barbers, lots of physicians. Of course, our post office. I've been making a list of all these things through the papers. It's literally like 22 pages long. But you just can't. They're moving so fast, right? They're just like they are. Go down to Fall Street instead of Falls. How fast has that corner changed in businesses? Just in the last 10 years. It's just the way things are. In the future, so this is going up the Barrack side. This is where Victor Strahl used to live. This is the first church past the firehouse or the old merchant store. I think this is a very, very old house. I think this was a store. I think this was the Goodyear store, and I think the top floor was the Templar Hall. But I don't have enough information to prove it yet. But you can almost imagine these windows are up there waiting to have something hauled in. So more history here. I would love to do a survey of Bearytown. I would love to get everybody to kind of report what they know about their houses, look at the deeds, and kind of put it on a map like Interlaken's doing. I think that would be very interesting as a way to save the history. So in conclusion, I hope I've given you a little bit of a taste of what Bearytown was like in the past and how important it was. It really was the center of Seneca County. Again, I'll make my argument. There's your 4 townships above, 4 below, and then split right in the middle between Fayette and Varick. there actually was a move in 1844 and 1855 to move the county seat to Fayette. And it lost both times by 1 vote in the supervisors. I wish you had been there. Who knows what happened. But, more than it being this physical central location, I think Henry Berry really was the perfect man to make, to facilitate bringing a divided county together for a very long time. And even in the early 1900s, people will make a comment back and say, maybe we need another ox roast to bring us all together. Maybe we need another political convention in Fayette. So for nearly 100 years, that was carried forwards. And, the last thing I want to share with you is that this is a good legacy. A good legacy for those of us who live in Fayette and Varick. This is a good legacy to inherit. And it's also a great one for us to live up to, isn't it? To think about the people who came before us and the legacy they left. So that's the end of my talk. This is some of the references. I did not include the newspaper references because it would have been pages. But I'm open to taking questions, and I really appreciate your attention. Thank you. Or if you have comments you want to share about what you remember about this building or Fayette. Yeah.
I think one of the, you were talking about why people came here. I think one of the things to research and to keep looking at the roads is the roads were being developed and built from Berks County, Northumberland. That particular area is where it was a huge influx from that particular area in here to Fayette. And some up to Waterloo, even the Whitmers, at the Peter Whitmer farm, they were Pennsylvania Dutch. Whitmers were Pennsylvania Dutch. The Smiths were coming in from Vermont.
Right.
And you can tell, one of the things you can tell is where the houses are placed. Pennsylvania Dutch tend to put their houses back from the road farther, whereas in New England, they tend to be right on the road, a little bit closer. But yeah, the roads, and I'm looking at more now. Route 15 coming up, 414, everything. Looking at the development of the roads for the influx of the people who were coming up. It was like the only place in town. And from the Sullivan campaign, this was the happening place. This was known as the Garden of Eden. And this is where the farmers are going to want to come up and they're going to want to settle because it has a reputation of being drop dead gorgeous.
Yeah, I see. Paradise.
Water sources.
Paradise.
Yep.
Other thoughts? Yes.
Yeah, I think you mentioned, when you say Pennsylvania Dutch, is it really like Deutsch?
Right.
That's really not Dutch, they're Deutsch, they speak Deutsch, right? So that's where the idea that it's Dutch, they're Germans, right?
Yeah, it troubles me so much when I see them refer to this as a Dutch church. I mean, there was Dutch Reform, but there is no question ever that this was a German Reformed church. None. Zero.
Okay.
Yeah. Other thoughts or questions? Yes.
Is there any correlation between the canal system and the growth of this area? I know there was a big revival came up along the canal system. Churches were being built and travel was easier with the canal system.
Sure.
I wonder how they work together.
Yeah, I think anytime you improve transportation, things like that could happen. The interesting thing about revivals in churches, and we don't have a lot of time to go into it, but this area I recently been studying this, was so underchurched and so understaffed by churches. That's why the Auburn Theological Seminary was built. Like one pastor could be responsible for 400 settlements of church. One! Could you imagine, even if you went to more than one a day, you couldn't go everywhere in a year. And so there was just a desperate need, for churches, which is interestingly why some of those missionaries wrote the stories of the settlement. Yeah. Other thoughts? Yes, Marty.
If you said it, I missed it, but the transition of the name from Bearytown to Fayette.
So I didn't say it, and I'm glad you brought it up. I had it in my talk, but I was already an hour, so I said, somebody asked about it, we'll talk about it. What do you guys think?
Lafayette, right?
Lafayette is in the area.
Well, not for Bearytown and Lafayette, though. Or I guess you could say that. So The answer, my answer to you, Marty, and to, like, I know Emily's assistant says she's been researching this a lot, is that this has been a continuous problem since the 1820s. Once they put the post office in Fayette, it became the Fayette post office. And it is the post office that lasted, right? All the other ones were either there and then gone. And so I see in the newspaper articles, even when Barry is alive, once the post office is put in, they'll put Fayette, and then in parentheses, they'll put Barry or Bearytown. And then sometimes they'll write Barry's, and in parentheses, in the 1820s, they'll put Fayette. And so I think it all centers around the post office, and it has been a permanent problem. The reason Bearytown transitioned out, in my case, is that Bearytown lost significance, right? And Henry Barry's legacy started to disappear. And so you start to see it fail like around the early 1900s. And then once you push up into when, like, my dad, when you were, did they refer to it much as Bearytown in the 1960s? No. Yeah, and by then, you know, we're down to what, just the McDougal post office and this post office. But I think it has to do with the post office, and then it's been a continual problem. You see it in the newspapers right from the beginning, even while Barry is still alive. They're referring to it as both.
So another question, what newspapers were being read in this area at that time, early on?
So the Geneva Gazette, you know, eventually, you know, we've talked about this before we met, there's a lack of digitization of a lot of newspapers in that interval between like the 1820s and the 1860s. I was getting information from the Waterloo Weekly Gazette, Seneca County Courier, and a lot of it sometimes is them looking back, right? They're reporting on an article that was written 40 years ago. No. Okay, any other thoughts or questions? Seth, yeah.
It's difficult to like suss out exactly why people do things or why things happen the way that they do. But you seem to believe that a lot of the growth around here at the very beginning had to do with one person seeking out other people to like fill jobs.
Okay.
Do you find anything instructive there for rebuilding communities? And if so, is that the way that you would go about it, or would you do something differently?
Well, sure. I mean, leadership is highly valued, right? And good leadership is even better, right?
You've seen this in several of your talks.
Yeah.
You have a person or a husband or wife, and they just those couple of people just totally change for whatever time they're active.
Yeah, and communities like this happened in Canoga with Reverend Mickelson and his wife. Absolutely, totally transformed Canoga. And so, in truth, a lot of what I'm saying about Henry is because of Bearytown. There was people coming, right, by the hundreds of thousands. But in this particular area, I think he did an excellent job. And so I hope we've done some credit to him tonight to bring his memory, his legacy back up. Also bring the importance of Bearytown to the county, and see how we can reflect on that for the future. Yeah. Okay, guys, we're getting well late. So thank you. Don't forget, the autobiography of a farm boy for us Fayette and Derek guys. Really good. Yeah, we'll have a big celebration in December for the 225th anniversary of Fayette. It'll be at the Tosa Vineyards. You'll see stuff online about it on Facebook, but it's we're gonna have a ball. Like literally a ball. Dressed up in your finest historic outfits. Myers, Henry Myers. No? No?